Mike Mussina pitched a 20-year career, and they said to Mike Mussina on his last year, he said, Mike, how did you adapt? And he said, you know what? Major leagues 20 years ago was not the same that it is today. Yeah. And you know what? You have to figure out what is the trend. What is it that you need to do? What are people looking for? And you know what? I'm the same way. I have learned how to adapt. I don't know if I said something to you, but my dad is got dementia, and he's in a nursing home.
Okay.
So to me, a lot of this is my dad.
It's an opportunity to. So are you going to kind of tell his story a little bit?
I'm going to tell. I'd like to tell a little bit of his story.
I would love if you do that. Yeah.
He was the founder, in my opinion, and to me.
Does he still have moments where he is lucid, where not anymore? Okay.
No, he's in 2020. We put him in a nursing home, and he's just gone completely south. He's going to be 85 on Friday.
It's his birth. Oh man. Okay. Well, I love that. That we'll definitely make sure to honor him. What is your father's name? So
Robert.
Robert. All right, Robert Turell. So let's definitely tell his story. And I love the fact that he sort of set the precedent, and you picked up the mantle, if you will, or the baton. Yeah. That's kind of why when we were talking about Jeff Petty earlier, I mean, he's in this business because of his father, and I think a lot of what he's doing is just continuing the legacy of his dad, and I think that's super cool, man.
I owe everything. I mean, my father was a consultant to me. I talked to him 3, 4, 5 times a day. He was in Arizona. I was in New York, and every time I would go to a meeting, I would call him from the car and say, "This is what happened," and we would battle. We would go back and forth, and he would say, "Did you say this? Did you do that?" And I'd be like, "No, they don't do it that way anymore. You're wrong." And he's like, "No, you're wrong." And we would go at it. And but I wrote a lot of business, and I wrote a lot of business because of him, and just his knowledge and his expertise. I mean, he used to do math problems in his head like this. Yep. And, if you look at him now, you're like, that's not the same person.
But I know. I experienced that. My mom passed last year, and so I experienced that. Like, it wasn't real dementia, but she just wasn't quite her anymore. So I totally get that, man. I'm sorry to hear that. But let's honor him today with today's episode.
Absolutely.
We'll probably keep a lot of that. Let's go ahead and just Nathan, I presume we're good to go. So I'm sitting down without any further ado. We'll probably keep some of that beforehand. But I'm with Larry Turell, president of Customized Consulting Services. Did I get all that correct, man?
You did. All
you told me like 2 minutes ago, and sometimes I talk and forget things.
It's all good.
But great to have you here, man. I was going to say great to have you in from New York, but obviously there's been a change of address now. You're in Boca Raton, Florida.
I am now living in Boca Raton, Florida. And I am living the dream.
So you got a nice little base tan, though. You've been spending some time out in the sun and enjoying life.
Playing golf as much as I can.
That's awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate you coming down, whether it was from the East Coast or from New York. I'm always grateful for folks traveling in, man. And you and I just connected, I don't know how many months ago now.
It's got to be close to 6 months.
Yeah, and we just kind of hit it off, though. It was
100%.
Like we had a phone call. I started to dig into your process. I loved kind of the stories that you had, but I loved what you do on behalf of your clients. And I thought, you know what, let's get Larry on. And so here we are, man.
Well, thank you very much.
So let's tell your story real quick. Obviously, we'll be talking about consulting. We'll be talking about the role of a broker's broker, if you will, and some sophistication around self-funding, some history of self-funding, all that good stuff. But I want to hear your bio. We were just having a conversation a little bit about your father and kind of how you got into the business. But if you'll walk back and start at the beginning and tell me your story a little bit. At Granite Peak Analytics, our passion is to educate payers and advisors to make informed PBM choices through independent data and unmatched expertise. Our unique ability to effectively eliminate prescription overspend for both plans and patients ensures our advisor clients win and retain business with pharmacy levers. Our role regularly evolves and adapts to meet the unique needs of each client in the rapidly changing pharmaceutical market. We are self-funded experts with a hyper niche on the overly complex world of pharmacy. Our objective approach and full transparency of consulting fees delivers rare financial alignment with our customers. Check out what our clients have to say at granitepeakrx.com.
So my dad was in the business well before me, and my dad was an innovator in self-funding. I mean, he basically started it, but I started in the business about 30 years ago, and it was all him. He said to me, you know what? You've lived under the same roof for whatever many years. Try this. And
because you didn't think you wanted to get into the business.
I didn't think
at
I
that
wanted
time?
to be in the insurance business.
What were you studying, or what were you pursuing?
I was studying communication, and I graduated college. I went to work for Eastman Kodak, and I sold copy machines.
Okay.
And that didn't work. And then I went into real estate, and I sold office space, and that didn't work. And then I went and did advertising, the music in the grocery stores, what do they call that? Muzak or whatever. So I sold that. And then my dad says, okay, now you've done it all.
Yeah.
Now it's time to get into this business.
So what did you think? Did it take some convincing to come around, or after a few misstarts?
I think I just knew that it was probably going to be my path. And my first week, I sold a medical plan, and I was like, God, this is easy. And my dad said to me, this is the only business that I know of that you can double your income every single year you're in the business.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, wow. And I love it because I love to help people. And my grandmother, she got on board, and she said to me, you know what you do for other people is really, really good, and it's important, and everyone needs health insurance. And my father said to me, the barber, the guy at the grocery store, your taxi driver, they all need health insurance.
Yeah.
So that was my fit.
It's an infinite market almost, man. Well, so I want to talk to you a little bit about your father's experience in the early days of self-funding, because when did the ERISA Act, was it 76?
I think it was 76.
Okay, yeah.
And so it was funny because my dad was a New York Life agent.
Okay.
And when he was with New York Life, he had clients that worked at General Foods in White Plains, New York.
Okay.
And he had other clients that worked at IBM, which was also in White Plains, New York. And he would say, I want to show you about New York Life health insurance. And they would say, no, we've got this other plan. And it was a self-insured plan.
Okay.
And he would say, well, wait a second, how come I can't have that?
Yeah.
And so what my dad was, he studied the model, and then he designed it for Chubb Life America, and he then went ahead, brought it to Chubb, and then Chubb, he taught their agents how to sell it. And he basically designed the very first self-funded plan for small to medium-sized businesses. There were businesses that were 10, 12, 25 employees that were now self-insured.
Interesting.
And
so what did the mechanics look like a little bit back then? I mean, were TPAs even a thing then?
No, there was no such thing as a TPA.
Okay.
And then he founded his very first, he founded a TPA. He started one in New Jersey that's still in existence today. And he then, metamorphosed the whole self-funding concept. And then companies like Great West came along, and then Cigna came along, and all these companies just springboarded on top of Chubb.
Okay.
And it was amazing how self-funded evolved. And where it is today versus what it was back then is like night and day.
Yeah.
But he was an innovator.
Well, that's really cool, man. And I can't even imagine, I started in the business of like self-funding and stop loss about 10-ish years ago now. And so that was right around ACA, post-ACA. Stop loss insurance was obviously a big thing. So I only really knew the newer version, the newest iteration of self-funding. But you hear some horror stories of companies 15, 20 years ago that I'm never going self-funded again. But so what was different, if you will?
Well, back then there was no
era?
aggregates.
Okay.
So the aggregate wasn't really, didn't evolve until much later, because what happened was there were some companies back in the very late 70s that were self-insured. And then what happened was they had a lot of spec claims.
Okay.
And what happened was there was too many in a group, and then all of a sudden the claims just got too
up,
big.
Yeah.
So the insurance companies, there was no such thing as medical accommodation, which they have now. There was no advanced specific.
Yeah.
So it was all a reimbursement contract back then. And my father, when I joined the business, he said to me, you're going to read these policies. So he gave me the booklet, and he says, read it. Read it, study it, and know it.
Yeah.
And so he made me understand how self-funding works. And then he would say to me, I don't want to send this group to the underwriters yet. You're going to underwrite it here with me.
Yeah.
And he taught me how to underwrite groups. And I would look at him and I'd be like, yeah, but Dad, I can't do it. He's like, there's no such word as can't. You can do this. And so I did analysis in looking at the age, sex demographics, the location. I looked at prices of what medical care was in certain regions of the country because we were working everywhere. And I learned how to underwrite groups. And then the funny part about it was when I would send a case to an underwriter back then, you know, I was always within 10% because he made me do it myself.
Right.
And he beat me up for it, but in retrospect, it was the best thing because
Well,
I
as field
knew
underwriting,
both sides.
I mean, like knowing what a case actually will look like, a ballpark, right? You don't have to be 100% accurate, and there's different manuals, there's different ways that people will derive a number, so you might not always be in agreement. But if you know the basics of how to field underwrite, I would get cases come across my desk at Sun Life as a stop loss rep, and I would look at it first because I want to know, would I even have the possibility of writing this case? Is it even possible? And so I would obviously still pass it along and let the underwriters ultimately come up with a determination. But I took pride at being able to validate and sort of vet the possibility on the front end. It just helped me in my job. It helped me as a salesperson. I hope it helped the underwriters knowing that I'd taken a look at the case before I passed it along as well. I just think it's the right way to do it. And I'm glad to hear that was your process. So your father really instilled that in you as well.
He did.
Yeah.
He instilled that in me, and that's why. And I've taken it so many steps further, and I really do love it, and I really love looking at it. And it's funny because there's many times when I'll get a quote back, and I'll call the underwriter. I'm like, "You're way off here," and they're like, "Well," and you always know they have a little room in their pocket or whatever, and you know what? You learn the tricks of the trade as it's evolved, but I think a lot of that's from my early training.
I don't doubt it, man. And what a way to grow up in this business, because some of it, like myself, I started late and by happenstance got introduced to it by working for a really good agency here in town. You sort of grew up in this world. So you got the real meat and potatoes, the history of self-funding, which I think is really cool because understanding where it came from helps sort of teach you the purpose of it as well as how to strategize for the future as this evolves. Before we move into a little bit of the future with you, you have a really cool story that I was hoping you could share, Larry. You already know where I'm going. I see your cufflinks with the New York Yankees emblem on there, so that gives a hint of what the story is going to be about. But I want you to tell the Batboy story, if you don't mind, because it's one of my favorite stories I've ever heard.
So in 1983, I was the Batboy for the New York Yankees, and I met George Steinbrenner, and I met him on a plane going to Florida, coincidentally. And I asked him on the plane, "Do you have any jobs in Yankee Stadium for the summer?" And he said, "Sure. You want to be a vendor?" And I said, "No, I'd like to be a Batboy." And he said, "Okay." And I was a Batboy for 1983, and that was the year of the Pine Tar game.
Yeah.
And the Pine Tar game, a lot of people don't necessarily
not everybody knows it. So if you'll tell
the story.
Yeah.
So I'll give it to you as it happened. So I'm a ball boy for the Yankees on the third base side. So I'm out there, and every inning I have a catch with the center fielder, with the left fielder, and I have an extra ball for the center fielder, and they're having a catch. So the Kansas City Royals are in town.
Okay.
And George Brett is a lunatic. I mean, I'm going to say that on this podcast, but the guy was nuts. And he was a party animal, and he was a fun guy, really, really nice. Anyway, there had been a history between Goose Gossage, Rich Gossage, who was the Yankee closer at the time, and Brett. And there was always this nervousness that Gossage would give up a home run. So anyway, Yankees are winning the game, and the Royals have runners on the field on the base pass, and Brett comes up to face Gossage, and sure enough, he hits a home run.
Right.
And as he hits the home run and he's traveling around the bases, Billy Martin, who is the manager, yells at Rick Cerrone and says, "Grab the bat." And so before the ball boy, the bat boy on the other side could grab the bat, Rick Cerrone picks up the bat, and he takes it, and he brings it back to the dugout. And you're looking at him, and you're like, what's going on? And nobody really understands. Next thing you know, the umpires are huddled around Billy Martin and Rick Cerrone, and everybody on Kansas City is in the dugout, and I'm in the dugout, and I'm sitting next to George Brett. I'm literally sitting next to him. And his arms are back like this, and he's sitting there, and he's like, "Yeah, I just hit a home run, and the Royals are going to win the game." and you just know that there's tension, and there's this conference.
So you had no idea what was going on.
So
at the
you're
time,
at
right?
the time, you really don't know what's going on, and then all of a sudden, Brett looks at me and he goes, "Hey, kid, if that umpire calls me out, there's going to be 2 dead umpires on the field." I'm like, I'm 17 years old. I'm like, this is too much for me. I start to walk away. 3 seconds later, they call him out. George Brett storms the field. So, of course, he storms the field, whatever. So what happened was that Billy Martin had known, and he had a conference before the game with a couple of the coaches and said that Brett had too much pine tar on his bat. Back then, the regulations was it could only be a certain number of inches above the handle.
Okay.
Well, he had it all the way up the barrel of the bat.
Okay.
So the rule in MLB was that if you have a foreign substance too high up on your bat, that's an illegal substance which could cause the ball to travel farther,
Right.
thus hitting a home run.
Right.
So the umpires looked at the bat. They then measured the bat on home plate because of the measurement, I guess, was the inches or whatever. And sure enough, it was too high on the bat, so they called him out. And it was wild. And every time they show that clip, I'm in it.
Yeah, you're there in the back.
I'm in it. I'm in
What
it.
I mean, what an incredible! Even the circumstances, just randomly meeting George Steinbrenner on an airplane, right? And then you had the audacity to say, "I don't want to be a vendor. I want to be a bat boy." And he says, "Okay, let you be a bat boy. You get to experience that event." I'm sure you have countless stories of players
I have stories that would knock your socks off. I mean, I used to have catches with all the players in the American League. Jim Rice from the Boston Red Sox used to throw knuckleballs at me to try to get me to miss the ball when I was having a catch with him. Dwight Evans would throw a ball from right field and there was just all kinds of crazy stuff that happened to me. And as a kid, I was a huge baseball fan. Don Mattingly's rookie year, Dave Righetti's no-hitter, all happened in 1983. And I have to tell you,
you clearly are still a big Yankees fan to this day.
Huge
Okay,
Yankee
yeah.
fan.
We might have had some people turn off some Red Sox guys turn off the podcast.
I can tell you that I drove Red Sox guys like Bob Stanley and to the airport. I mean, it was just crazy stuff. I mean, got tips from Dwight Evans. Dwight Evans was a sweetheart of a guy. But just knowing and being around baseball the way I was, and then I even got paid, which was even better.
That's even better.
People said to me, "Wow, did you make money?" Yeah, I made like $29 a game, and then I made tips from players, and you wouldn't believe these players. They're real guys.
Yeah.
They're you know what it is? People don't realize that superstars or people who are in baseball, they're regular guys just like you and me, and they go to the bathroom the same way that you and I do. There's nothing different, but just seeing them and hanging around them. I mean, I remember after I was a bat boy, 2 years after I ran into Dave Righetti at a club, he goes, "Hey, Larry, what's up? Let's party." And I mean, that was just my life.
That's awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate you sharing that story. As soon as you told me, I was like, "Oh, I've got to ask Larry to tell us on the podcast." But for the folks that tune in, obviously for the consulting and the benefit stuff, we'll come back around there. But man, I can tell even the way you light up telling that story today that it was a big part of your life, man. So I appreciate that. I want to come back to, if you don't mind, kind of that transition of working with your father, and then obviously you sort of picking up the mantle and running with it and doing your own thing. So talk to me early days, and then how you sort of evolved as a consultant. Pareto Health is the manager of the largest employee benefits group captive in the United States. And it's also now the main sponsor of the Self-Funded with Spencer podcast. I chose to partner with Pareto Health for 3 main reasons. Number 1, their dedication to improving the world of health benefits. Number 2, their mission to reduce volatility and to make self-funding simple for mid-sized employers. And number 3, the strength and scale of their program. With over 2,300 member groups and more than $1 billion of stop-loss premium under management, Pareto Health is the most robust solution of its kind in the country, period. Stay tuned for more information because I'm sure I'll be featuring them on an episode of the podcast very soon. Visit Pareto Health at paretohealth.com or follow them on LinkedIn to stay up to date on the latest news and developments.
My dad and I worked my dad was in Arizona and I was in New York, and we worked together. He was more of a consultant to me. He would walk me through deals that I would go on meetings and talk to clients and talk to prospects, and he would help me with language and different things like that. And then I would battle with my father because I would say, "You're older than me. People don't talk that way anymore, and they don't do those kinds of things anymore." But I learned how to become an expert in my craft. And my dad said to me, you have to learn how to be better than the next guy. And I learned, I used to go on ACA calls. I would subscribe to magazines. I used to do articles in different publications. I went up to the auto dealers and did a conference for them and talked to them about health insurance and different ways of funding. I did the Water Association. I was doing all different kinds of things because you know what? Your knowledge and your expertise only goes so far. And a lot of brokers don't want to do this kind of work. They don't want to know the intricacies of self-funding, meaning when claims come in every month, I'm the one who's reading those reports, understanding, looking at those spec claims, looking at the funny part about it is that the carriers like my business because I don't have a very high loss ratio. My loss ratio is one of the best. Matter of fact, it was very funny. HCC years ago used to give us a bonus based on production. And then they said, what we're going to do is we're going to change that. We're going to modify it, and we're going to put in what's called a loss ratio modifier.
Yeah.
And if your loss ratio is below a certain percentage, we're going to give you a kicker.
Yeah.
I had the highest, meaning the lowest loss ratio and the highest bonus from HCC for 2 years running. And then
That's when they're calling up, "Hey, Larry, could you bring us some more groups, please?"
Exactly. And then there were TPAs that said, "We don't like him. You know what? We're losing our bonus because the guys like him." But you know what? Because of what my dad taught me, I knew what to look for in underwriting.
Yeah.
And
so when you're pre-screening these opportunities, obviously you told me too earlier that you have really high placement ratios with some of these carriers because you do a lot of that field underwriting before. You don't just throw anything at them. So what happens for you with your strategy if you look at a group and go, not a fit for self-funding? Like what do you
then
do?
I throw them to the fully insured world.
Okay,
I said, it's funny. I went on a conference with Companion Life last year, and they introduced me as the guy with the highest closing ratio.
Did they really? That's
and I was a little surprised. And the guy who invited me said to me, he says, "Larry, you close 90% of what you bring to us." And I said, "You know what? Because I don't want to waste your time."
Right.
A lot of people just want to throw enough stuff against the wall and see what sticks. I don't think that that's fair to them, nor is it fair to me. So when I do my legwork and I look at it and I analyze it and I say, you know what, you're not a fit for self-funding. If the average age is 55 versus 35, there's a difference there.
Yeah.
Meaning you got to understand that. I mean, I've had groups where I had a client of mine whose average age kept going up and up and up. And I finally said to him, I said, you know what, it's time to move. Let's go back to the fully insured world. And you know what? The laws have changed so much with regards to community rating in certain states like New York and New Jersey. And you just got to know what to do. And I think that there's not enough people who are knowledgeable, who understand this, who know what to look for. And you know what? You have to be creative. And you know what? I remember a broker came to me years ago. He said to me, "I got a 150-person group. No carrier will write it. Will you write it?" I said, "Absolutely." He said, "But Larry, the participation is only 30%. I said, "Doesn't matter. There are ways of figuring it out."
Right.
And that's the difference. And that's what I bring to the table is my creativity. I don't know. My mind is constantly racing and thinking about how do I solve this problem? Because to me, my grandfather always said to me, "Larry, there's no such word as can't." And you know what? I believe that. I believe that if you work hard enough and you think about it long enough, you will find a solution. And I think that there are solutions out there. I mean, listen, I'm going to plug Zoe from Slingshot.
Yeah, you brought her up this morning. I'm like,
her podcast was fantastic 2 weeks ago. I listened to it. I called her right up. I set up a meeting with her. I have 3 clients that are moving to her because of the fact that she was on this podcast and she's looking for ways to save money. Well, guess what? That's what I want. That's what my clients want.
Right.
And you know what? It's not about the money that I make. I do well because I'm smart. But I do well because my clients trust me.
Yeah.
And they know that at the end of the day, a lot of guys will say, well, broker of record and I'll screw you this. And no, I'm not that way. I'm the best at what I do because I care. And I care a tremendous amount about doing the right thing and showing these alternatives and how to make it work.
Well, so the marketplace will reward. This is a meritocracy to a degree, right? Not completely. The relationships go a long way, but like I was saying earlier, I think those are sort of table stakes these days. You've got to be proficient. You've got to have the acumen. But the market will reward efficacy. So how good are you at what you do? The marketplace will reward it. And I've always approached this with a similar mentality to you. It's like if I could tell a better story, have a better strategy, bring new ideas to the table, and always sort of stay in front of my competitor, they may pick up a business here or there because they did a slightly better job on that case. But my belief is that I could stay out in front by simply learning and educating myself and trying to be better every single day.
You know, it's funny. I send articles. I pick up articles all the time and I send them to my clients. And I send them to prospects. I send them to brokers. I send them to clients. You have to always know what's going on in the marketplace.
Yeah.
I think the best analogy that I would give somebody is there was a pitcher for the Yankees I know.
Yankee story again. Oh, here we go.
Mike Mussina pitched a 20-year career. And they said to Mike Mussina on his last year, he said, Mike, how did you adapt? And he said, you know what? Major leagues 20 years ago was not the same that it is today.
Yeah.
And you know what? You have to figure out what is the trend. What is it that you need to do? What are people looking for? And you know what? I'm the same way. I have learned how to adapt. I sell a tremendous amount of life insurance. I do assets under management because the companies that I work with, they need buy-sell agreements. They need partnership insurance. So when I joined Guardian, and I'm with Guardian Life Insurance Company right now, and I have a great agency, and the owner said to me, he's like, Larry, you're the most well-rounded agent that we have in our office. You do medical insurance, you do dental. I'm one of the top 15 in the channel in ancillary group benefits because of all the other things that surround benefits. What people don't understand is you can't just go ahead and say, all right, I'm putting in a medical plan and that's it.
Right.
It's not just that. What about the long-term disability? What about the group life insurance? What about, having an employee assistance program?
Well, all these benefits now are a recruitment tool as well. I mean, you've got to be offering great benefits to people. That's an attracting mechanism for employees. It's also a retention mechanism as well. And yeah, you're right. Like if people leave, I've actually seen percentages quoted where 50, 60, 70%, something like that, were willing to leave a company because the benefits themselves weren't good enough.
The strangest thing is I put ancillary benefits in every one of my cases. I have a case that I lost because of acquisitions 15 years ago. I'm still receiving on their short-term disability. I still get a commission check on it because the brokers that come in, they don't think about these things. So you know what? That's a loss to them.
Yeah.
But that's not, listen, that's not self-funding. That's just.
Well, I'd like to hear about your, because the consultant's consultant or the broker's broker or whatever you want to call that terminology. I mean, there's different variations of what you consider a general agent, right? And different degrees of proficiency around self-funding. Some of them just simply shop stop-loss insurance. Some of them do the full service strategy. So I want to hear about your role or what you do in that role for other brokers.
So most of my brokers are either life insurance agents or they're investment advisors or they're guys that really, they get an introduction to a company and they say, what do I do? And what I tell them is, you turn it over to me and I will do everything for you. And I am very thorough. And one thing about me is I'm also very fair. So in other words, some brokers will say, well, you know what? What's your piece? It's 50%. There used to be a time when I used to say I would only take 25%. My father said to me, you're losing your shirt on that. So now I'm very thorough. I do everything. So if I go in and I do the medical, the dental, the vision, and I'll do the medical and dental self-funded 100% of the time. Then I'll go back, do vision, and I have contracts with some of the greatest carriers, and then I'll look at doing, and then I'll say, do you have Keyman life insurance, or do you have stuff like that? And then I'll say to the broker, if you want, you do it. Mm-hmm. If you want me to do it, I'm just going to take 50%. But if not, I push it to you. I'm not looking to be in your face. I'm not looking to take over your business. I'm looking to be your partner.
Yeah.
I'm looking to be the guy that's going to make sure that you never lose the account and solidify your position inside the account. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you that some of the brokers, I have a broker that's been working with me for 30 years. 30 years.
30 years.
And
wow.
he says to me, he wrote life insurance, tons of life insurance. He never gave me a piece. I said, fine, I don't want it. But I do the medical and the dental and the vision, and he said to me, every month he'd call me up, he'd say, I got my commission. And I'd say, great. After a while, then it stopped, and then at renewal, he'd be like, how are we looking this year? I'd be like, I got it taken care of.
I got it taken care of.
And he said to me, he says, you're the best guy I've ever met. He says, your commission checks pay my mortgage, do this, that, and the other. So,
well, what is it you like about that role versus the retail side or being the broker?
So I guess for me is that if I have a broker that I like and trust and know that is going to include me in solidifying the relationship, I want that. Because remember, I have brokers that have 5 cases with me. I have brokers that have 2 cases with me. I have brokers that have 1 case with me. The most part is that brokers themselves, I hate to say this, are lazy. They don't want to do the work. So if they're willing to introduce me, I'll do all the work. I like guys that say to me, Larry, here it is, you run with it. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's what I want, because then I almost feel like it's my case and I have autonomy, but I never ever exclude the broker, because my father said to me, Larry, remember where your bread is buttered.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And my bread is buttered from the broker.
Well, but see, it's a symbiotic relationship, right? They go out and do the hunting. They secure the groups. They do their role in life insurance, like you said. But then they partner with you for the things that they're not as good at or they don't want to do, which is okay. And then you're compensated for your role. Everybody wins. The employer ultimately wins because they have a nice combination of partners managing their benefits.
I've had situations where I had a client call me up and say, I haven't heard from that broker in 2 years. We want to do life insurance. Can you do it for us? And I say, you know what, with all due respect, I can't do that. Right. And they're like, no, we want you to do it. And so I'll call the broker up and I'll say, listen, you need to get yourself back in there.
Right.
And the brokers have come to me many times and said, thank you. That was really nice. You didn't have to do that. You could have taken that. And I said, but you know what? You may not have referred a case to me in 2 years, but you know what? Now that you know that I'm doing this for you, now
when you develop that trust, right? When you develop the depth of that type of trust, then they trust you in the future implicitly, right? And explicitly as well. I want to ask you though, Larry, if you don't mind, I've seen one of your proposals before. You shared it with me as we were talking at PlanSite, my previous organization, and kind of juxtaposing what you were doing versus that and seeing if it was the right fit. But you have a really unique way that, in my opinion, of all that I've ever seen a broker's proposal or pitch for an employer, the way that you tell the story of self-funding. So can you kind of go through how you develop this process of storytelling?
So it's interesting. It's been, my dad and I did it together, and my dad said to me, he's like, self-funding is a complicated concept, and most people don't understand it. And he said, what you have to do is you have to design a proposal that's not only user-friendly, but you need the layman, because remember, they're not in your business. So you have to think like they think. Mm-hmm. And so when my dad and I were designing it, we thought, well, what's going to make it simple so that these people who are reading this, who are in manufacturing or in textiles or in travel or whatever, law firms, accounting firms, we have all walks of life. And you know what? We made it simple. We really we dummied it down. And I will tell you, very rarely does a client leave my meeting and say, I didn't get
I don't
that.
get it, right? Yeah.
They always
Yeah.
say, my God, this is a really good concept. I will tell you, self-funding has been around now because of my dad over almost 45, 50 years. And the funny thing about it is I still have clients today that say, when did this concept come around? Is this brand new? And I'd be like, no. And they would be like, so surprised.
Well, see, that's fascinating to me. You know, even though it's obviously evolved and morphed since the early days, that there are still employers that, what is this self-funding thing? You're educating them almost like it's a new idea. It's like, no, this isn't new. Nobody's just ever presented it to you, which is kind of astonishing to me.
I mean, I had a law firm call me up and say to me, we've been fully insured for the last 10 years. And I said, well, have you looked at non-traditional healthcare? And so she looks at me and she goes, non-traditional healthcare, what's that? And I said, self-insurance is one of the things. She goes, oh, that's not for me. So if you say those words like that, people like, no,
Yeah,
they run scared.
Yeah.
But then if you say non-traditional and you ease them into it and say, listen, I'm going to break it down for you. I'm going to make you understand. I had a guy call me up and he said to me, I've heard a lot about you. Your reputation precedes you. But I'm letting you know right now, I'm not interested in that whole self-insured thing. I've heard stories that are bad. I said, okay, fine. So sure enough, I go ahead, and what do you think I did? Of course I showed him a self-funded plan. He looks at the self-funded proposal, and he says, wait, I told you. Right on the front cover, it says self-funded proposal. And he looks at it, he says, I told you I wasn't interested in that. I said, let me this. Listen to what I have to say. If at the end of this meeting, you're really still not satisfied, I'll pick up my stuff and I'll walk out, and you know what? You can find someone else. He said to me, by maybe 30 minutes into the meeting, he says to me, this is a great idea. So I said to him, I said, he says, all the preconceived notions that I had were 100% wrong. He's still a client today.
Well, so where do you think those preconceived notions came from? So if people that have an impression or an idea in their mind of what self-funding is, what are they reacting to?
So there was a story, there was a self-funded plan for an association of Nassau County in New York back in the early 80s.
Okay.
And what happened was they were in a self-funded plan and the plan blew up.
Okay.
And the plan didn't have enough assets. And it no aggregate, and it went the wrong direction. And as a result, it got a lot of publicity. It was in the New York Times. It was in the Daily News. And everyone was reading about it. They got sued, and it was a bad thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people heard those stories about how bad self-funding is. Even, I mean, I went down to a case in Georgia, and there was a guy who said to me, I'm going to do this self-funded thing, but I'm going to do it without an aggregate. And I looked at him, and I said to him, I said, why? He said, because I'll never hit it. I said, you know what? Here's the thing. You have insurance as a safety net. So even though you don't think you're going to hit that aggregate, you want to make sure that you have it in play.
Right.
Do you want to know something? So I'll give you a little background about my business. So I have had 3 aggregate hits in the last 30 years.
Yeah. I believe it. I believe it.
That means meaning the claims were just off the charts. And one of the cases, the reason why was the client didn't disclose. They came over from Fully Insured. I'll never forget. It was a tire dealer up in New Jersey. They didn't disclose all their information to me. And all of a sudden, within 6 months, the claims went just bonkers. And I was so upset. And the carrier came back to me and they said, Larry, what happened? And I was almost embarrassed because it was the first case. It was the first case that I just totally misread. And it wasn't my fault. It was because I wasn't given all the information.
Right. Well, that's what usually then let's talk about ag insurance just for a second. And I actually share your perspective. I know there's a debate of whether it's necessary. As maybe on bigger groups, I could see where you would say it's less necessary. But when you look at the cost of aggregate insurance, it's usually a couple bucks, right? Sometimes on smaller groups, it might be a little bit larger. But it's usually a few bucks PEPM. For just the sleep insurance, for the feel good at night insurance that I've got maximum liability protection. But I wanted to comment too, like I've seen, suggestions that it's less than 2% of the time. I think at Pareto I heard in passing, but don't quote me, we see about less than 1% of the time. But the story that you told is the point is, usually something was missed. If aggregate insurance comes into play, it's because something wasn't disclosed or something wasn't missed, or an underwriter, quite frankly, might have made a mistake. I've heard jokes about whether or not people's jobs might be in jeopardy as underwriters if they have an ag hit. I mean, that's how extreme they are. But if it's relatively inexpensive, at least you have it. And I look at it as that's why you buy insurance in the first place.
100%.
It's such a nominal cost for that protection on the back end.
I totally agree. And to me, I mean, listen, 30 years, 3 hits in 30 years, that's nothing.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've only ever experienced one myself in the 10 years that I've done.
And when it happens, you almost like, it's upsetting. And back when I started in the business, there was no such thing as ag accommodation.
Yeah.
So what happened was you'd write a contract, you'd write a 12-12 in the first year, and then you'd turn it into a paid. Well, in the second year, when those claims start to come in, I always tell the story. I say to a client, listen, I'm going to tell you right up front. Next year, you're going to look at a 20% increase on the spec.
Exactly. Yep.
But you're going to get a 2-year rate guarantee on the admin. The ag number is not going to go up, and you'll be in good shape. And clients, if they understand and you make them understand the concept and how this works, it's super easy.
I think that's the whole point, right? With the way that you present your proposals, the way that you tell the story. I mean, that's one of the things I love about Pareto, and not to make it a commercial, I'm only 3 weeks in, but let me say this. One of the concepts that I really love about the way that they go about it and we go about it is the Beyond the Spreadsheet events that they do, where they go out and actually educate the market, and they try to really simplify the way that the story is told about self-funding and about captives, so that you don't have that knee-jerk reaction. You don't have that guard that's put up or the defense mechanisms where somebody won't listen to you. You simplify it.
You also have to understand that, captives are a great idea. I mean, I have 3 clients that are in captives, and just the tax savings alone, being in a captive, is huge. And, you have to, especially today, our system is broken. And in order to fix our system, you have to find ways to save money, to be creative, to think outside the box, do something different that the average guy doesn't want to do. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, you're going to rise to the occasion. But in addition to that, you will win a client for life. I mean, my clients, they don't like me. They love me. I mean,
at first I thought you were going to say they just don't like you.
No, it was very funny. One of the beginning times when I was selling self-funding, I would say this client doesn't go to the bathroom without calling me first. I had their medical, their dental, their vision, their life insurance, their group partnership insurance, their EAP program, their 401k. I did it all. And it was the funniest thing is I was on the phone with the benefits administrator at least twice a week. Right. And she would say to me, well, Larry, I need this, and Larry, and I had clients, employees leave companies that I do the benefits for, and they called me up and they were like, I want what you did here at my new company. And I would be like, sure. And that's the way a lot of my business came. I love working with brokers. I love working with direct clients because, to me, I want to have fun. You know what? We only go around this thing one time, and you know what?
I was going to ask you that. You're segueing into perfectly, because I was going to ask you this question. It's like, for doing it for 3 decades, what keeps you continually to be excited about this business and this industry?
I have to tell you, so not to give you kudos, but this podcast is one of the things that I think is fantastic.
Well, I
listen to your podcast once a week, like religiously.
Thank you.
And to me, I like I said to you, I'm already doing business with a couple of your people because of the podcast. And you know what? What people don't understand is you have to be educated. You have to educate yourself. You can't just sit back in the corner and expect business to fall your way. You have to go out and get it. You have to learn. You have to be smarter than the next guy. You have to have relationships with the right kind of people. And if you do have those relationships and you do work them the right way, remember, networking is not about what you're going to get. It's what you're going to give.
Absolutely.
And to me, I'm a giver. And I mean, listen, I have right now in my life, I mean, unfortunately, I'm married 27 years. I got divorced. But right now, I'm with the greatest girl ever. I mean, she just puts a smile on my face. I'm living in Florida where every day it's sunny and beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
I get to play golf at least 2 or 3 days a week all year round. And you know what? I'm loving it.
Well,
I say
it's
I'm in summer camp.
Yeah, it's refreshing though that after the tenure that you've had, that you still continue to be passionate about it. I mean, I literally, no joke, and the reason why this podcast is self-funded with Spencer is it changed the trajectory of my career. It literally, for the better, obviously, but it literally discovering this and understanding the financials, the mathematics, but the art and the creativity that comes along with self-funding, it opened up a world to me that I never knew existed prior to that. And it literally altered the course of my career and my life. And so if I can communicate that passion and joy and the love I have for this to other people and attract those people to the industry through hearing stories and, listening to cool people like you, to me, that's the role that I hope I get to play in this business. Yeah. PlanSight is a complete game changer in the world of insurance brokering. As a broker, you know how time-consuming and error-prone the traditional RFP process can be. Well, what if I told you there's a better way? PlanSight is the only end-to-end RFP solution on the market made specifically for benefits agencies. It's like having a superpower that gets you an average of 8 to 10 hours back per employer renewal per year. And the best part? PlanSight supports all carriers, all funding types, and all group sizes for over 20 different benefits. If you're ready to make your RFP process faster, more efficient, and more profitable, it's time to call PlanSight. Visit plansight.com now to book a free demo and discover the future of insurance renewals.
I have to tell you, I think that self-funding, I love it. I absolutely love it. I have such a passion for it. I live for it every day, and all I want to do is, to me, if I could write, my best year, I wrote 18 self-funded cases in 1 year.
That's awesome, man.
And that was a really banner year. I haven't had a year like that in a long time.
Well, let's see if we can get you a little bit of uptick in interest from this podcast. Well, I want to do a couple things, Larry, before we sort of move towards the end, if you don't mind. Talk to me a couple things about like mechanics. What has materially changed about self-funding in the tenure that you've had? I mean, anything like the big stuff that you think is different?
So there was no such thing as ag accommodation.
Yeah, I remember saying that. Yeah.
That, and then advancce specific wasn't there either. It used to be a straight reinsurance contract.
Okay.
Where it was reimbursement. The client paid the claims, and then you waited for the money from the reinsurer. There used to be no ACHs. I mean, ACHs obviously now, but I mean, back then, we would wait for claims to come in. I mean, claims used to take, no joke, 90 days. Claims processing was all paper.
Yeah.
So when my dad...
Did you say there'd be like stacks on a desk of somebody going through?
It was very funny. When my dad first got me into the business, my dad made me go to the TPA, and he said to me, now see how they process a claim. And I literally stood there for a day and sat at a claims examiner's desk who had a stack like this of claims and watched her data entry every single claim, one by one. And it took, back then, it would take probably about 30 minutes to process a claim.
Yeah.
Now, today, they do it electronically, and they could probably process a claim in a few minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that back then, though, it was amazing. And there was no, you really didn't have, the computers were more like word processors.
Right.
They weren't really computers, as they say.
Well, now, I mean, I think about that versus what today, where we have this emergence of artificial intelligence. Literally yesterday, I shot a podcast with the CEO or co-CEO of Healthy, and Healthy with 2 E's is they do a lot of data analytics. They do a lot of ingestion of like unstructured data, and they turn it into structured data that can be sourced, and they use AI. And I'm like, my God, what is this industry going to look like in a few years?
Oh.
I usually ask this question, so why don't I just ask it now? Like, what do you think is going to be the next few years of healthcare? Where are we going with this thing?
So I think that I've listened to your podcast, and I think that these networks, are going to fall by the wayside.
You think so?
Oh,
okay.
I think that people, remember, I was in this business when there was no such thing as a network. And I remember when they introduced the networks, and there were companies like PHCS and Multiplan and MagnaCare. Those companies all evolved, and they built these huge doctor networks. That I think that, now these insurance companies have these large networks, but I think that things are going to change. And I think that they're going to fall more to the wayside because there's much more analytics. There's much more information. Companies like Slingshot who are, doing audits and showing companies how to save more money.
Right.
So I think that that's the future. I think that, just like anything else, this has to evolve.
Yes, it does.
And it has to go in a direction where, like, I was talking to somebody literally yesterday, and I said, I have a client who has a mother-in-law in Belgium, and their health care is, there's no cost to her. She goes to the doctor, she goes to the hospital, she gets her care, she doesn't pay anything, no co-pays, no co-insurance, nothing, and she walks in and she gets the same care that she would get here in the United States, but the difference is it costs her zero there.
Right.
Now, that's a system that works.
Do you think the U.S. would ever adopt
Nope.
that? Yeah. Okay. So what role? No. Yeah, I would agree with you. But what role do you think public or a single payer style healthcare system could potentially play? Just out of curiosity, and this is more not even political, but just sort of like what you objectively think could
I think that the problem is that they've put the healthcare in the onus of the employer.
Okay.
And I think Obama tried to shift that away from the employer, and it didn't work.
Okay.
And I really feel that, we have to figure out something that's going to make it more economical. Just to give you an idea, when I first started selling health insurance, it was $65 a month for a single health insurance on medical.
And probably a really low deductible too, I would presume.
There was no deductible.
No deductible.
No deductible.
Even better.
$65.
Yeah.
Today, the average cost is $650 a month. That's 100%.
And
600%.
with a deductible, and with probably
And so to me, the one thing I've also realized is that the West Coast, California specifically, is ahead of the East Coast. If you've ever looked at healthcare, what they're doing out there is different than what we do here. And I don't know why. But the country is a little bit divided, and I think that they're more thinking about the future. They're the ones who started with putting onus on the employees, making the employees participate, making the employees understand. See, the problem is that healthcare for so many years, even today, people just don't know what it costs. Even like I look at my kids and I say to them, do you know what it costs for your health insurance? And they're like, no, we don't know. And then when they go to the doctor and they pay the copay, they're like, this sucks. Well, be an employer for a second.
Right.
If you realize that you have 20, 30, 50 employees, 100 employees, or 200 employees, it's expensive.
It is, yeah.
And you know what? There has to be a means to controlling healthcare, and we have to figure that out. We really do. And you know what? I'm a firm believer that I'm willing to try anything because you know what? Something is going to have to change.
Well, I would say it comes down to a few things in my mind. Access, making it very simple for people to access the healthcare system. I think it comes down to being a clear and transparent on what things cost, to make it very simple for people to shop. And I really think if we're going to include the employer in that equation, there needs to be some onus on them to incentivize the members to make better choices. So I'm not talking about like high deductible health plans where there's skin in the game and consumerism. I'm talking about give them incentives to go to this MRI versus that MRI because you're going to save $3,000. Make it zero out of pocket for that employee to make that choice.
Right.
So give some incentive. And I think if we do those three things, we're probably accomplishing quite a bit in aggregate.
ClaimDoc is a medical claim auditing and member advocacy company. We provide fiduciary services to employer-sponsored benefit plans, and allowing them to create an environment where we ensure that the benefit plans are being charged in a fair and reasonable basis.
My business is basically people, and it become a real simple transition. We thought it was going to be far more complex. I've saved, we'll say, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I could not say enough about ClaimDoc.
There is no reason why, it's funny, when you do a self-funded plan, my average increase when I do a self-funded plan with clients is less than 10%. And, if you look at trend and you look at what the industry average is, people are getting 15, 20%. And, when COVID hit, the government, you had to know, was going to transfer that to the insurance companies at some point. And you know what? I'll never forget, I had a client that got a 45% increase, and he looked at me and he goes, what do I do? And I said, you move to self-funded.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that, it's the only plan that if you have a bad year, and I tell them 1 in every 5 years is going to be a bad year. And when you have that bad year, guess what? The very next year could be great. I mean, I remember having a client in upstate New York, and I would say to them, what are you putting in the water? Because your claims are really good now. And 2 years ago, your claims were off the charts. And that's the beauty of self-funding. And if you design it and structure it the right way, believe me, this is the greatest thing ever.
Well, that's what I would agree with you, man. And we'll wrap things up. I know we've probably been talking, an hour-ish, Nathan, somewhere around there. I was going to comment on that, though. Chris Hamilton, I referred to him quite a bit, and I gave him a lot of free publicity, so he owes me a beer. But Chris was talking about recently how he had a case study on an employer who'd been self-funded for 5 years, and they actually did a look back of where the total costs were today versus 5 years ago. Their cost at 5 years on was actually lower than the fully insured renewal 5 years ago. That's how much money. It's like $1.5 million of savings over a 5 year time.
I tell every client that whatever you're paying now with United or Aetna or Blue Cross, you're going to see a 3-year rollback. It's going to take you 3 years to get back to where you were. And if you design it right, it could be 4 years, it could be 5 years.
Right.
I tell
and even then, that's your new baseline, right?
Correct.
Yeah, it's not like you couldn't save money from there in the future. Well, so why don't we wrap things up, Larry? I want to give you an opportunity, just sort of closing thoughts. The floor is yours. What do you want to leave the audience with?
So, listen, I love self-funding. I love healthcare. I am a broker's broker. I want to be the guy that you come to, that you talk to. If you need any expertise, you need some help, you think that you want to save some money, you want to design better benefits, there are things that you can do in a self-funded plan that you can't do in a fully insured plan. And to me, I want to be the guy. And if you'll give me the opportunity, I'll show you how to do it.
I love it, man. Well, I really appreciate you. It's been fun to get to know you. We're going to go grab some lunch after this. I do want to say, Larry, thanks for telling the story, the Batboy story, and especially...
There's so many more.
I know.
There's so many more.
We'll have you down here again next year, and we'll do a round 2 and capture some more. But I appreciate you sharing your story of your father as well, and the transition into the business and your love for what we do. So it's been a joy, man, and let's go get some lunch now.
All right, man. Thank you very much.
Larry. All right.